perfect run of victories. He has pretty much dominated every single session you can think of. He's pretty much come through and taken fastest time in pole position in every single session. He's won every single race so far, 4 out of 4, and even taken the fastest lap, 4 out of 4. This really is, at the moment, his championship to lose at this point. So the rest of the grid as we cycle through, Wang Zhongwei for Origin Motorsport will start in 5th position. He's a bit further back in the order. And the result from yesterday saw another victory for Alex Sawyer. It was a 1-2 for Evans GP, with Sawyer with a win. 2nd place for Seth Gilmore. 3rd for Ayrton Asdathorn. 4th for Inigo Anton. And as we mentioned, the top 4 in this race get reversed. So its 4th place goes on to pole position. Thomas Yuli, the only Masters driver in the field, was 5th in the field from Rishon Rajiv. We look further back where we see the 4th row of the grid with Wang Zhongwei and Joshua Berry. And then right towards the back, we have Wadapong Aimwachan for star performance. And then at the back of the grid, after his retirement yesterday, having gone off into the gravel, is Ben Newing, who was quite frustrated with himself, but he will hopefully try and put that right for Black Arts Racing. And he has to do so from the rear of the field. You can see the treaded tyres that the F4 cars are running. That means because, as I was watching some of the Thailand Super Series race before we went live here, and the conditions are a lot different compared to where they were yesterday. That means it's going to be a little trickier out there. A lot more spray, a lot more standing water around the circuit from the rain that we've had. And the driver's now getting used to a different track surface and a different set of conditions compared to yesterday. That means they'll have to use the safety car start to get underway of their own accord. And once racing gets underway, it'll be interesting to see how quickly some of these drivers get up to speed on this slightly different surface as the throng of team personnel and VIPs and media personnel all filter off the grid, and we get set for 25 minutes of racing around the Chang International Circuit. It's the 2nd event of the season for the F4 Southeast Asia Championship. We've already been to Sepang just a couple of weeks ago at the beginning of May here at Buriram, and then we're now moving on to a double header for the here in Thailand, because in a couple of months' time, go up to Bang Saen, the fantastic street circuit, and that will be at the beginning of July, also supporting Porsche Carrera Cup Asia and the Thailand Super Series. And then we have another return back to Sepang for the rest of the season. 2 visits in September, and that will be an opportunity in 3 more chances each time before we get to the end of the season. So 14 races in total in this championship. And at the moment, as you can see, the wet tyres are firmly going to be in use. In terms of the championship coming into the weekend, this is prior to results from yesterday. Alex Sawyer had this championship pretty much on lockdown already in this early stage. 98 points coming into the weekend before yesterday. And he is ahead of Rishon Rajiv, the Indian driver, who had 2 second places from races 2 and 3 at Sepang. Seth Gilmore was 3rd in the points, 2 points back behind Rajiv. And then despite disqualification in race 2 at Sepang, it's still Inigo Anton, the Philippines driver. He was just ahead of Cheng Meng, who was level on points coming into this one, 33 each. Just a point back was Ben Ewing behind him as well from Vietnam. And the rest of the order was Wang Zhongwei and Thomas Lee, separated by a point, 27 to 26. And Joshua Berry, who's back on just 10 points. And then we have, making their first appearance this weekend, Wadapong Aimwachan and Ayrton Asdathorn. So the field will head off behind the safety car very shortly. 25 minutes of racing in store. And this championship only in its 2nd season, but it's nice to see that we've got still new drivers coming in every round so far. And just we had a few drivers, and just look at the championship 2 years ago. Of course, 2 years ago when we had the championship, Jack Beaton took the title with 130 points. And it was a pretty consistent run for him towards the end. Now, one car I think that's being pushed off the grid is car 44. And car 44 that has an issue. That is... Hold on a second. That's Wadapong Aimwachan. So he was set to start from 9th on the grid from the back. But unfortunately, it looks as though he will not take the start. So an issue for the Star Performance driver will not make it. So here's the starting grid. It shows that Rishon Rajiv is on pole position with Thomas Yuli alongside, but I'm pretty sure the top four's reversed. It should be different. So Rishon Rajiv on pole position. Thomas Yuli will start alongside him on the front row of the grid, as we see, still working on Imre Chan's car in there. Then Inigo Anton and Ayrton Asdorthorn will start on the second row of the grid. So it's top 6 reversed by the looks of it. So top 6 reversed. And Inigo Anton for Black Arts Racing looking to get himself on the podium. Ayrton Asdorthorn looking for his second of the weekend so far. And then we get to row 3 where we find our Evans GP lockouts, Seth Gilmore and Alex Sawyer, who continues to dominate this championship. He'll have to pick his way through from 6th on the grid, but given the pace he's shown so far this season, that shouldn't be too much of a problem if he can keep it on the straight and narrow. Moving back to the 4th row of the grid is where we'll find Wang Zhongwei for Origin Motorsport, the only Origin Motorsport car on the field, and Joshua Berry, the man who is part Australian, part Korean, and he will be in the Black Arts Racing car in 8th on the grid. Then it's Warapong Imre Chan, who would have started in 9th, but now is in the pit lane, so it looks like he will have issues. Either he will have to start from the pit lane, or he might not even take the start at all, which, if that's the case, is going to be quite a disappointment. And then we have, right at the back, after he went off in the gravel yesterday, was Ben Ewing, Black Arts Racing. He's got a lot of work to do to pick his way up through the order from P10. So the cars make their way around on the Chang International Circuit. It's one of the newer circuits out there in Southeast Asia, only built and first inaugurated back in 2014. And we've had the likes of Japanese Super GT race here as well, the Thailand Super Series that's here this weekend, and now of course F4 Southeast Asia getting their turn this season. Now look at the conditions compared to what they were like just now with the Thailand Super Series. It does look as though it has started to dry up quite significantly. It's not totally dry up there. The reason why they started behind the safety car because of the change in the conditions. But it doesn't look as wet as it was before. So it looks as though that the natural heat and humidity around here in Thailand is certainly helping the circuit to dry up as fast as possible. But there is still some spray around on the circuit, which means the wet tyres are required as they head off on the formation lap. And I think they're getting at least 2 formation laps to adjust that. That's usually the... Okay. Now the timer has also started as well, so the timer has started as soon as the race got underway from the safety car, which means that they're just getting up to speed here. Usually when it comes to changing conditions, at least from my experience in the UK, they'll give them 2 formation laps rather than 1 to fully adjust to the conditions if that's the case. So Rishon Rajiv will at least prolong his lead from pole position. But in terms of racecraft, we'll have to see whether or not that the likes of Ben Ewing from 9th on the grid and also Alex Sawyer, the Vietnamese driver from 6th, can pull his way through the pack. And the Chang International Circuit, 2.83 miles in length. And there's been talk recently of a Thailand Grand Prix for Formula 1, given the popularity and success of Alex Albon, who of course races for Williams, and this circuit, and it is been created to the highest FIA and FIM standards, and it has also hosted rounds of the World Superbikes and MotoGP World Championship, so it is certainly one of the most important circuits in Asia, and one that's certainly helping Thailand to emerge more on a world stage in not just Southeast Asian motorsport, but in world motorsport in general. Now, lights are out on the safety car, which means we'll be getting underway very shortly. That will mean that our pole sitter, Rishon Rajiv, he effectively becomes the safety car. He decides when to get the race underway. Just under 20.5 minutes to go in this second race. And so F4 Southeast Asia is about to burst back into life here at the Chang International Circuit at Buriram. And we'll see if Rishon Rajiv has got enough to keep the lead from pole position on this restart. So Rishon Rajiv will lead them away. Thomas Yuli behind them, the only Masters driver in second place. And it's Inigo Anton, Ayrton Asdorthorn, Seth Gilmore, Alex Sawyer, then Wang Zhongwei, Joshua Berry, Ben Ewing, and Warapong Imre Chan, who started for the pit lane if he does start at all. But they're starting to pick up the pace now as they head towards the start of the race. Of course, they can't pass till they get to the timing line, but it's a great start on this effective start of the race for Rishon Rajiv. He heads across the line and will lead them away as race 2 of the weekend for Chang International Circuit. A for F4 Southeast Asia. Gets underway at racing speeds. And up the inside already goes Thomas Yu Lee for second place on Inigo Anton. He's trying to defend as hard as he can. The Evans GP car there just trying to pick its way through too. That's Alex Sawyer. And as they make their way down towards the next corner, it's long straight back down towards turn 2. Side by side for second place. Anton and Leah going for it wheel to wheel. He's got the better braking on this very tricky, slippery surface. It's also side by side for 5th position. 3 abreast, in fact, behind them. That will be between Asderthorne, Gilmore and Sawyer. So the 2 Evans GP cars trying to make progress, but it's a 5-car scramble for second place as Rishon Rashid tries to pull away. Here comes Thomas Yu Lee looking to the outside line of Inigo Anton, the Filipino driver. They make their way down the hill, and as Rishon starts to pull away, still defence is pretty strong. And looks as though I think that Ayrton Asderthorne's been shuffled back a couple of places too, but they're all battling for positions here, and it is still Inigo Anton in that second place. And off the road has gone, I'm afraid, Warapong Aimbo. He did make it out of the pits after he had a pit lane start, an issue on the grid, but just looping it around all by himself. And what has been a rather testing start to the race for Warapong has now decided to go even further into a nosedive. He's just trying to recover, which he does. Probably took him a little longer than he would have liked, but even so, he is underway again, but right towards the back of the field. And the tyre driver has worked hard to try and impress at home. Leaders come towards the end of lap number 1. And now the pressure is on, because now darting out to make a move here. That looks like Alex Sawyer, who's already up to 3rd place, make that 2nd. But he goes a little too deep into the final corner. Now he sees Inigo Anton pull alongside, but Sawyer's got better traction off the corner. Inigo tucks into the slipstream. We'll have to look to the outside line to make the move, because you know Sawyer's going to go defensive under brakes for lap 2. And in towards turn 1 they go. And it is the 2nd place for Sawyer, so effectively it must be a matter of when rather than if he gets the lead. He's already got designs on the rear end of Rishon Rashid's machine as they make their way down towards the next turn, which is the right-hander at the hairpin of turn 3. Long 180-degree hairpin that slightly opens out on the exit, then long straight back towards the fast left-hander of turn 4. But you can see in these slightly adverse conditions, the circuit deceptively looks dry, but it's not. You can see the wet tyres kicking up the spray as now Sawyer lines up the move here to the lead, and Rashid will have to try to defend on the outside line. Sawyer tries to move across, but Rashid won't give it up that easy. But he might have to, as Sawyer quite literally sails around the outside into turn 4. And the man who's dominated the championship from the very start only needed literally barely a lap and a half to get from what was 6th on the grid into the lead. There's a spin behind. Full looks up, that is Seth Gilmore. Seth Gilmore in the 2nd of the Evans GP cars recovers and somehow is missed by everyone behind him. He was running in 5th position. He's now down to 7th. He's now lost out to Wang Zhongwei and Thomas Yu Lee as well. So the Evans GP driver, very lucky to get away with that and not making contact with the cars that were immediately behind him. So Alex Sawyer then, in his customary position, out in front in the lead. And I guess now, unless he makes a mistake, like his teammate Seth Gilmore, I guess the question's got to be, by what margin is he going to win this race by? I know it's quite preemptive, but given the fact he has set pole position in it on every single race so far, effective the pole time in every single race, where you can qualify on pole position. He's taken the fastest lap in every single race, and he's won every single race. That's a key thing. Now this is interesting because you can see here the drivers are actually moving off the typical racing lines to try and cool their wet tyres. That's interesting because I noticed that the circuit was starting to dry up a little bit, but it's interesting now that they're actually purposely going offline to keep these tyres cool. You can see Alex Sawyer and some of these drivers in a very tricky position. Now this circuit appears to be drying at least online pretty quickly. But the question, I guess, has to be, is anyone going to be brave enough to dive into the pits if they feel that possibly dry tyres could be the answer? If someone does make the gamble and jump into the pits to take dry tyres, it's not going to be a Formula 1 style 2-3 second pit stop. This is going to be a longer pit stop. But do you take that gamble and change onto the dry tyres and try and actually pick your way back through the field and use the dry line, use the drying circuit and the better pace advantage that you'll have to full effect? It's going to be an interesting task to see if he does make that happen. Meanwhile, change has been on for 6th, so that has been a retake of 6th position for Seth Gilmore, getting past Thomas Yu Lee, and he's now trying to get through from Thomas on on Wang Zhongwei for a spot back in the top 5, which he has. So that's now up to P5. His next target will be the star performance driver of Ayrton Asdethorn. And they make the way just out through the last few corners on the lap as they now make their way back through this long arcing left-hander of turn 10, then back towards 11, then the very sharp final corner of turn 12. It reminds me of the final corner at Adelaide, or even the old school Lycée corner at Magny-Cours in France. It's a very tight corner. You have to really get on the power on the exit. And again, as they start to seek the wetter parts of the circuit in order to cool the tyres, Alex Sawyer is trying to pull away here, looking at the gap he's got in front. He currently leads by 2.7 seconds at this point, but interestingly enough, Seth Gilmore, his teammate, has just set the fastest lap of the race, 151.319. Now I wonder if it's either just been maximising the grip available on these wet tyres in these damp conditions and these mixed wet and dry conditions on track, or if he's simply just fired up after his spin earlier on. Right moment there for, looks like Rishan Rashid in second place again, but I think they're purposely going wide to find that water, to find the wetter parts of the circuit, to cool these wet tyres off. I will be fascinated to see if everyone decides to go to the end here, if the circuit continues to start to dry out even more than it has done already, or if anyone in this 13 minutes duration left in the race is daring enough to dive into the pit lane, bolt on a set of dry tyres, and it potentially could be a gamble that will completely go wrong, or it could be a genius move that possibly wins someone the race from a very unlikely situation. There is Ayrton Asdethorn. You can see there the Evans GP logo, that car having support from Evans GP. So technically, in some ways, it's a third, in inverted commas, Evans GP car, but it's getting loose satellite support from the team. Ayrton Asdethorn, first weekend of a championship, and proving quite potent at the wheel of that number 51 machine. Make the way out of turns 10 and 11 and back towards the short straight towards the final corner. Bit of a gaggle going on here. This is between Inigo Anton Asdethorn and Seth Gilmore. There is Seth. Remember, just set the fastest lap of the race. Out in front, Alex Sawyer now has a 2.5 second lead. And in actual fact, he was slower than the 3 cars behind him. This is interesting. So Alex Sawyer, compared to the previous races that we've seen him in, is not being allowed to pull away here. The 3 cars behind are all setting personal bests. Quickest of them all, but of everyone in fact in that top 5, is Seth Gilmore. He set another 151.473. This race might not be over. He also set on that lap, did Seth, a fastest first sector of anybody, and now he's looking down the outside into turn 3 to try and take 4th placement as the Thorns they turn in. And he's got the outside line. He's got much more grip on the outside, but he runs a little bit too deep. I thought he might have had plenty more grip, but he's actually run way too wide. Over the AstroTurf he goes, back onto the circuit, and he slots into the slipstream. So couldn't quite make the outside line work as he just ran out of grip out at the outer reaches of turn 3. But now the straight towards the very fast left-hander of turn 4. And this is very tricky, where they've got to try and find the water, but of course on the damper parts of the drier parts of the circuit, it'll be just overheating the tread blocks quite severely. Now there's a drive-through penalty for car 44. That's what Waterpoint Imwachan, and also a warning as well for Seth Gilmore for track limits exceeding at turn 3. That might just be for what he's done right there. So the race control certainly on their toes when it comes to monitoring track limits. Alex Sawyer, meanwhile, has continued on. It says on there that on the graphic on the screen that the fastest lap of the race went to Alex Sawyer, but if I look at his lap times, his best lap time of the session is a 152.809, but Seth Gilmore's done a 151.319. And also on this lap so far, Seth has set the fastest first sector. In sector 2, it was Rishan Rashid with the fastest second sector. And again, Seth Gilmore lapping in the 1 minute 51s as they come across the line. So Sawyer now has a lead of almost 3 seconds. So he's now starting to wind it up a little more. He's finding the pace that Seth and co are starting to pick up. The circuit's getting a little bit quicker. 151.749 was the last lap for Sawyer out in front. The man who simply cannot be stopped at the moment in F4 Southeast Asia continues to spread eagle the field. Was he gone straight on? I thought he got straight on for a second. I think he almost locked up, went very wide. He did go wide, up at turn 3. I thought for a second the car locked up and it was going straight on. It didn't turn it at that angle that I expected it would have done. So interestingly enough, Alex Sawyer struggling on the mixed conditions. We've now got a scrap for second now between the two teammates as here comes Inigo Anton down the outside towards turn 4. Rashid tries to defend, but Anton's seen this happen before. And before they even turn in for the apex of turn 4, into second place goes the Filipino driver. And I think, is that also on screen I'm seeing as well, a possible warning for track limits? We'll come to that in a second because they're still dicing over this second place. Who knew that mixed conditions could really spice things up here in race 2 of the weekend for F4 Southeast Asia? And now that Rishon Regiv is now down to 3rd position, now under threat from both Ayrton Asselthorn and Seth Gilmore. This is that 4-car scrap going on between the quartet. And all this fighting as Gilmore runs wide again over the curves, trying to find the limits. It's only going to benefit Alex Sawyer to extend his lead. And I think he might well get away with that little mistake at turn 3. So using the circuit as much as they can. And again, it's still saying the fast lap of the race gone to Alex Sawyer, but my timing screen says different. It's still gone at the moment. Best time, Seth Gilmore, 151.319 up the inside there for 3rd position goes Asselthorn. He leaves the door open and here comes Seth Gilmore on the exit. So the move from Asselthorn into the final corner has opened the door for Seth Gilmore, who now gets the toe from Asselthorn down the straight towards turn 1. And so Rashid, who started with that previously in 2nd place, has tumbled all the way down to 5th, losing out to his teammate Inigo Anton, then Ayrton Asselthorn at the final corner, and seconds later Seth Gilmore taking full advantage of the open door to basically get it through. Is that an issue for Asselthorn? What's happened there? Oh, so that's I'm getting confused by the car. That was one of Pogacar who's just come out of the pits again. There was the second of the start the very similarly liveried cars, which was the Star Performance machine. So the second Star Performance car put me off for a second there. I thought it was an issue for Ayrton Asselthorn, but once I saw his teammates lapping, then that was the end of that mystery. Gap at the front has come down from 2.9 to 2.3, so it's based on that mistake at turn 3 that's cost Alex Sawyer the time. 152.615, but he's responding in the second sector. And sector 2 has him in fastest in the second sector by the looks of it. That is now 1 minute 50. He did set the fastest second sector of the session, but he's now been beaten there by Asselthorn. So Asselthorn now is fastest in the second sector as the circuit starts to get faster and faster, quicker and quicker out there as it continues to dry. You can see just about visibly a dry line forming on the circuit. As we look here at Wang Zhongwei, who is currently sat in 6th position, best of the rest outside the top 5. And in a bit of a comfortable race of his own is Wang Zhongwei. He is currently at the moment, gap-wise, some 8 seconds ahead of Thomas Yu Lee, the only Masters driver that we have in the field. He's currently sat in 7th place. Joshua Berry, the Singapore driver, is 8th. And then it's 9th for Ben Ewing, who couldn't quite get himself back on the same form that he may have had yesterday. And of course the ongoing problems for Imre Chan continue. Side by side for second, here comes Asselthorn, not wasting any time to make himself up in 2nd place. And Inigo Anton has now slipped back down to 3rd, but he's back in the slipstream, moving to the inside line to try and cool the tyres. Gilmore was going with them both, and down the outside goes the Filipino driver. This is now side by side for 2nd place again. And on pure straight line speed, it might be Anton who beats the braking zone. Watch for Gilmore on the outside of the background in the Evans GP car in 4th. They all practically run pretty deep into the turn. And the outside line still quicker than the inside run. And Anton now tries to get the place back. Now he's got track position. The next corner is a left-hander. But now Asselthorn sees his opportunity. He tucks back into the slipstream. And which way will he go this time? He has passed down the outside line. You can pass on the outside of turn 4. He's thinking about it, but it's a very high-speed corner. And can't quite make that stick. And so it looks as though that Asselthorn will come back for more very shortly for 2nd place. This is further back for... This is Asselthorn, in fact, with Gilmore on his tail. And I almost wondered for a second where Anton was, but he ran quite wide onto the curbing. Now he's under threat once again from Asselthorn, looking up the inside of the next corner, which is a right-hander. Here comes Gilmore, possibly to try and take 4th position. And now into this little winding section towards the end of the circuit, these double right-handers, as you turn your way out of turns 8 and then 9. And then there's kind of complex of corners through 10. And then 11 is long, a little right-handed kink-off of 10. And then back towards turn 12, that sharp right-hander that takes you back onto the pit straight. What a battle we've got here then for 2nd place, as it looks like Inigo Tried to make that stick and break a little bit too deep, and Astlethorne's got the undercut on the inside line, gets to switch back on the exit, a little wiggle of oversteer from Astlethorne. This now gives the opportunity for Gilmour to get into the toe, and it's now 3 for second place. So, Anton holding on for third position. Astlethorne has second. Gilmour's in the mix. And don't count out Rishon Rashid either, with 4 1/4 minutes to go. The Indian driver, who was second at one point, started on pole position. He's not totally out of this. The harder these three fight each other, the easier it is for him to close in. And I'd also keep an eye on Wong Zhongwei in the background. He's in P6 watching all this happen, as it's side by side for second place. Astlethorne has the outside line and goes deeper, but it might leave the door for Gilmour to come through. He has left the door open. It's very close and almost contact. But Gilmour's got the opportunity. Up the inside he goes on corner exit. Better traction for the Evans GP driver. Now they make the sprint down towards turn 4. It's nose to tail, second, third and fourth. Here comes Anton down the outside towards turn 4 into the left-hander. Astlethorne tries to make the move stick. Gilmour can't get there either. And now this worked the way through, and Gilmour looks up the inside towards turn 5. Brilliant pass from Seth Gilmour. Opportunistic move, but he gets the switch back, and here comes now, that was Astlethorne in fact, going back up the inside of Gilmour, and Gilmour's got back through as a result of that. So Astlethorne going a little bit too deep, and through he goes. And look at Rishon Rashid behind them in 5th position. He's also closed back in after he was a few seconds back a few moments ago. So all of this is now benefiting Inigo Anton, the Filipino driver. We should also mention the fact that all this is severely benefiting our race leader Alex Sawyer, who is now nearly 5 seconds out in front, and even setting fastest first sectors at the moment. So all this battling is not benefiting these 4 whatsoever. It's fun to watch, it's great to see, but for Ayrton Astlethorne, who's now back into 4th position, he's now got some work to do to pick his way back up the order. 2 minutes 45 on the clock left to go. We're going to get, I think, roughly, possibly 2 more laps to go. Lap time's now getting to the 1:49s, as now Alex Sawyer does set the new fastest lap of the race. That's 1.4 seconds quicker than anyone so far. There might still be some damp patches out there, but for the tyres that he has got underneath him, Alex Sawyer certainly setting the pace and continuing on to what will be yet another victory in F4 Southeast Asia. Down the hill towards turn 3, under brakes, again just seeking that wetter part of the circuit to keep those wet tyres cool. Gilmour is on the prowl here. He wants to make it an Evans GP 1-2. He's locked into the slipstream of Inigo Anton, who's looking in the mirrors. He sees that black and bright blue machine looming large in 3rd position, and Gilmour looks to the outside in towards turn 4. But there was no room to squeeze through, and so on the apex he just had to hold back. Back into turn 5. And how much would Inigo Anton love to pick up a good result here, given the fact that if you look at his results from this season so far, as we can look back now at our untroubled race leader, Alex Sawyer, who's now around, must be around about 6 seconds out in front. There is simply no catching Alex Sawyer. He is the class of the field at this point. Now, Inigo Anton has had a podium so far this season in race 1 at Sepang, but he hasn't yet. And if you look back at his results from yesterday as well, he missed out on the podium yesterday, so he could get his 2nd podium of the season, and if he can stay 2nd, it will be his best result of the season so far too. Across the line will come Alex Sawyer to start the last lap of race number 2, and now he's more comfortable on the dry line, it seems. Even though those wet tyres have worn up a little bit, some drivers still seeking those wetter parts to try and cool them off. The 2nd place is not yet done right now. This is the battle for 2nd. So Inigo Anton, the Filipino driver for Black Arts Racing, locked in the 3-race scrap with Seth Gilmour for Evans GP and Ayrton Astlethorne in Star Performance, which is effectively a Evans GP satellite supported team this weekend. Down towards the braking zone of 3, all taking roughly the same line, and they're more comfortable now, it seems, on that drier racing line than going offline to try and cool them. I don't think Gilmour's close enough in the toe. It's a long straight down towards turn 4. Might get a word here in a second, because Gilmour's getting closer. He's trying to close in as much as he can down the straight, but he's not going to be enough for him to dive up the inside to 4. He puts himself into Anton's mirrors, tries to distract him offline. A little wide there for Gilmour. In fact, him trying to come offline to distract Anton has actually distracted himself. He's running a little deep. That might give Astlethorne a window of opportunity. work the way now out through turns 6, back towards the double rights of 7, 8 and 9. There's 3 right-handers that back towards that very kind of winding section all the way back to the checkered flag. This is going to be a real sprint to the end, but I think Inigo Anton, he says tentatively, he's doing enough to hold on to this. Meanwhile, out in front, there is literally no stopping this man so far in F4 Southeast Asia. He won all 3 races at Sepang. He won race 1 yesterday, and he continues his win streak in 2025 today. In fact, no, there's a final lap, in fact, so it must be +1. So forgive me, my first time covering the championship, so excuse me for that. So actually, we get 1 more lap, which is, you usually say what the phrase is, hide the checkered flag. Well, they've done it for 1 more lap, and that could change around pretty quickly. Now for 3rd place, Seth Gilmore is under threat now from his 3rd position from Ayrton Asdorthorn. So this is now the final lap of the race. Through turn 1 they go. Now locked into the slipstream. Let's see if Gilmore can do anything to close in here down this long drive through the kink of 2. Back down towards that very tricky braking zone of 3 at the hairpin. Looking to the inside to cool the tyres off. Then back to the racing line goes Gilmore. Under brakes. The wider approach now for Asdorthorn. He might be comfortable on that wider line. A little deep into the corner. We'll look for that sharp undercut as he tries to get the switch back on the exit. Nothing doing. Back down the straight. Gilmore now is under more threat from Asdorthorn, and he is threatening Anton in front. Back towards turn 4. Again, Gilmore just darting out, just trying to put some distraction, trying to put the Evans GP car a little more prominently in Anton's mirrors. And again, you look to the inside line. This will see him run too deep and run over the curb as Asdorthorn senses an opportunity, tries to get a wheel up the inside on the exit through 6 and 7. But there's no room, and through turn 7, Asdorthorn has to sit back and wait for another opportunity. But he's running out of opportunities as he comes up towards turn 8. Now back towards turn 9. And wide over the curb goes Gilmore, back on again, defending, so he's really under pressure is Gilmore. Can he hold on for the last few corners? Now we'll try this again, shall we? Now he's won all 3 races at Sepang. He won race 1 yesterday, and now he will take the checkered flag to make it 5 wins out of 5. A complete domination so far continues for Alex Sawyer. He wins race 2 of the weekend for the F4 Southeast Asian Championship. But who gets 2nd, 3rd and 4th? Asdorthorn up the inside for Gilmore to take 3rd position. It's going to be 2nd place for Inigo Anton, but for 3rd place towards the line, it's going to be a photo finish, and just gets himself at the line. Seth Gilmore 3rd. But only just. If we look at the timing string, what was the gap between them? In the end, it was just about 0.119 of a second. And they were still setting fastest sector times, even on the final lap of the race. So Seth Gilmore 3rd. Ayrton Asdorthorn only just misses out in 4th. Rishon Rajiv is in 5th. Then Wang Zhongwei in 6th. Thomas Yu Lee in 6th position. 7th place for Joshua Berry. Wang Zhongwei 6th. Then it's Thomas Yu Lee 7th. Joshua Berry in 8th. Ben Ewing in a very quiet race in 9th, and despite being a couple of laps down, unfortunately, a race to forget for Wadapong Aimachan, who's back in 10th position. But the question's got to be said. What else can you do to stop this man? Alex Sawyer, who looked like he might have been under threat in these mixed conditions, once he hit the front and took benefit from all the cars behind battling amongst each other, Alex Sawyer still proving he is the man to beat in the championship. So Alex Sawyer takes his 5th win of the season, just ahead of Inigo Anton with his best results of the season so far in 2nd place. A photo finish to the end sees Seth Gilmore just hold on to 3rd ahead of Ayrton Asdorthorn. Then Rishon Rajiv, who started on pole, is back in 5th. Wang Zhongwei in 6th, Thomas Yu Lee 7th, Joshua Berry 8th, Ben Ewing in 9th place, and Wadapong Aimachan rounds out the 10 drivers that we had. Wadapong didn't start the race from the grid, from the pit lane in fact, and had to work his way through. Had a spin at the beginning of the race, also at turn 3, and then had to work his way through, but not a race he will remember any time soon. So 2 Evans GP cars on the podium, which will certainly be a fine sight for them. Evans GP, of course, who are quite experienced in other higher levels of junior single-seater racing, and good to see them in the championship supporting F4 in this part of the world. And quite a young talent is Alex Sawyer. I'll be keen to see how he gets on when we put him up against a good cars possibly in F4 in Asia, or maybe if he does the Middle East Championship or anything else on top of that. Alex Sawyer certainly proving to be a decent talent from Vietnam, and certainly proving his pace in what was a pretty tricky race to try and read, because initially it was very bunched up in that lead group of 5 or 6 cars. And then once Alex Sawyer picked his way through and was able to actually get himself a good lead, he allowed the cars behind to scrap amongst themselves. But up to the P1 board comes our championship leader, our dominant championship leader, and still unbeaten in 2025. Immediately the cooling fans go in to make sure the engine is cooled off. But Alex Sawyer, pretty cool, calm and collected, and taking it all in his stride. There's an outburst of emotion to come in a moment, but yeah, simple handshake from his engineer. It's all a day's work for Alex Sawyer. He's done this before. So excellent stuff from him. And of course we have one race tomorrow to round off the F4 Southeast Asian Championship event here at Buriram. And then after that, of course, we go to the Bangsan street circuit, which I've seen some footage of. It's a fantastic, narrow, tricky street circuit, a proper old school street circuit. So that'll be an exciting one to watch for Southeast Asia. And then after that, it's back to 2 visits to Sepang to round off the season. And Inigo Anton is going to be very delighted with a personal best finish this season. As I mentioned, all the races that he's finished within the top 5, but he's took a 3rd place in race 1 at Sepang, was disqualified from race 2, and then took a 4th position in race 3, and then yesterday in race 1 he took another 4th position behind Ayrton Asdathorn. So now at least the 2nd, 3rd and 4th group have been switched around a little bit, and it's now Anton's turn to take a podium finish, his best result of the season. And there is Alex Sawyer. It barely looks like he's broken a sweat. He's so cool, calm and collected. That's been such a straightforward drive for Alex Sawyer. A beaming smile on his face, and no wonder he is the current dominant championship leader, having won the first 5 races. There's a quick photo opportunity with Inigo Anton. Good to see the Filipino driver doing so well. And Seth Gilmore, who takes his 4th podium of the season. He picked up a 2nd and a 3rd place at Sepang, 2nd yesterday and 3rd today. The only other time he hasn't finished on the podium was race 2 at Sepang, where he finished in 6th. So good effort from the Australian. And incredible stuff. So let's look at some of the highlights from race 2. It was a damp and wet circuit, as after we saw some of the action from the Thailand Super Series earlier. So the race had to start underneath the safety car, with the timer starting when the safety car left off. It was problems with Warapong Imachan, who couldn't get the race underway from the grid, so had to start from the pit lane. When the race did get underway, it was a pretty decent start for Rishon Rasheed, but immediately into 2nd place when his teammate Inigo Anton, and he dived his way up the inside past Thomas Yu Lee to take 2nd place. A spin out of the pits for Warapong Imachan meant that he had more problems, and his fortunes once again took a further nosedive. He survived that early on. It didn't take long for the erstwhile championship leader Alex Sawyer to carve his way back through the field. Had some strong battles in the mix, but eventually swept around the outside of Rishon Rasheed to take the lead, and from there he wouldn't be seen. Now Seth Gilmore, also remember, did have a spin at one point early on. He managed to avoid the cars around him, but he very strongly picked his way back through the field and got himself into a podium position. Out in front, Alex Sawyer was simply uncatchable. He was setting good pace, even though he was coming offline to keep his tyres cool. There was absolutely no stopping him. This was the talk of the race, though, this massive 4-car battle between the 2 teammates of Rasheed and Anton, plus also Seth Gilmore and Ayrton Asdathorn. And the 4 cars battled back and forth all the way through. And at one point, Inigo Anton holding on to the victory. And as Rasheed dropped backwards, it became a 3-way scrap for the 2nd place battle between Rasheed, Gilmore and Asdathorn. Lots of back and forth between them. But despite late pressure in the end, it would be Asdathorn who would hold on to that 4th position behind Gilmore and Anton. But out in front, once again, taking his 5th victory out of 5 so far in F4 Southeast Asia, is this man, Alex Sawyer, still uncatchable. And this was the fight in the closing stages. Gilmore trying to desperately hold on to 3rd place and go for 2nd. But 5 wins out of 5 for Alex Sawyer. And he continues to be the man to dominate. The big question certainly has to be, can anyone top him in this championship? But at the moment, it certainly looks like no one has an answer at any point in time. It was also close in the end for 2nd place, because Inigo Anton took his best result of the season, and only just holding on to 3rd after a late challenge from Asdathorn was Seth Gilmore to make it an Evans GP double podium here in race 2 at Buriram. So, excellent stuff.